Stern has become such a wussified sycophant, he doesn't realize that telling Kamala that he'd vote for a wall is telling her that he knows she's as dumb as one. I mean, not to mention, Trump is the wall candidate, not Cackles McKnee pads. Stern got even more pathetic, wondering how she doesn't nap.
That brings me to Howard Stern and his interview of Kamala Harris, where he put the cards on the table about how he was feeling, in particular about her latest media tour, which did not include Saturday Night Live, but she was lampooned on it a little. A lampoon may be too strong, but she was mocked, as they usually do, just to Republicans. Take a listen.
Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly didn't just poke holes in Howard Stern's carefully protected legacy. They blasted it apart like a demolition crew with a personal vendetta. With Greg's razor-sharp sarcasm cutting through every layer and Megyn's precise, almost surgical breakdown, they exposed the shocking transformation of radio's once fearless rebel into a polished, pampered shadow of his former self. The man who was once a firebrand, unafraid to stir chaos, has now morphed into a celebrity confidant whispering soft praises. Stern's fall from grace wasn't simply mocked, it was obliterated. This wasn't just commentary, it was the total destruction of a myth, and they made sure no microphone was left unturned.
This is what keeps me up at night. I don't understand how my fellow Americans, I don't even understand how this election is close. And yes, I'm voting for you, but I would also vote for that wall over there. When you said you don't nap, I get it, because like what you've taken on is extraordinarily difficult. And I mean, do you feel the pressure of the moment in the sense that, like when I met you out in the hall, I said, I'm really nervous because I want this to go well for you. I want it to go well for the country. Even when I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the, where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
Gutfeld stepped into the spotlight with that sly sideways grin, the kind that warned something big was about to drop. But this wasn't just another jab at politicians or a rant about pop culture disasters. This time, his target was Howard Stern himself, the self-proclaimed king of all media, the shock jock who once gave FCC regulators nightmares and made soccer moms break into nervous sweats, was now under Greg's microscope. And Greg didn't just roast him. He dragged him through a time machine, pulled out the receipts, and held them up against the fading glow of a man who once defined rebellion.
Period, while listening to it. You should hear what keeps him up at night.
Greg started by marveling at Howard's dramatic shift, from the gritty, sharp-tongued anti-hero of radio to a Botoxed, bathrobe-wrapped imitation of an NPR host with a side gig in therapy podcasts. He joked that watching Howard Stern today is like discovering your favorite punk rocker just opened a luxury spa in the Hamptons, serving organic tea and giving lectures on emotional balance. Greg laughed, remembering how Stern once mocked everything. Politicians, celebrities, political correctness, nothing was safe from his fire.
She also appeared on Howard Stern, where he said he'd even vote for a wall over Trump. Harris replied, "I'm not a wall, but I am plastered."
Now, Greg pointed out, Stern sips green juice while apologizing for the very jokes that built his career. Greg didn't just say Stern sold out. He claimed Stern sold the booth, the mic, the headphones, and even tossed in his backbone for good measure. He compared the old Stern to a wrecking ball and the new Stern to a delicate interpretive dancer who only makes a move after clearing it with legal. Greg chuckled at the irony. Stern now preaches tolerance and personal growth, yet his archive is stacked with content that makes today's Howard look like he's locked in a courtroom battle with his own ghost.
But it is incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300, $400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then they went woke. It's not a chicken or egg thing there. You know what order it came.
Then Greg dove straight into the heart of the hypocrisy. For decades, Stern branded himself as the unfiltered voice of truth, the fearless outsider who wouldn't bow to anyone. But the moment he secured his massive Sirius XM fortune and surrounded himself with celebrity friends, he transformed into exactly what he used to ridicule. Now, he's a pampered insider, shielded by assistants and carefully crafted interviews. Stern didn't just shift from punk rock to polite conversation. He sprinted from rebellion to public relations at record speed.
Now remember, Stern used to throw bologna slices at strippers' butts. With accuracy, I might add. Now he's worried the possible leader of the free world can't handle his verbal foot rub. I wonder if he used to get this nervous for the strippers before he'd spank them on their bare asses with a dead fish.
Greg mocked how Stern, once allergic to Hollywood phoniness, now rolls out the red carpet for A-listers, massaging their egos like a seasoned concierge at a luxury awards show. It's no longer raw, unpredictable radio. It's a polished promotional circuit where actors arrive to be flattered. And Stern nods along like a therapist guarding his 5-star review. Greg painted Stern's studio as a haunted mansion of fading relevance. Dim lights, moody tones, and a voice that now sounds less rebellious and more like a luxury car commercial. He said Stern hasn't aged. He's morphed into a wax figure of himself, preserved by nostalgia and hair dye. Greg even joked that the only thing more shocking than Stern's current content is that anyone who remembers his 1990s self can listen now without bursting into flames from secondhand embarrassment. The so-called king of all media spends more time lamenting social norms than smashing them, a shift Greg found both hilarious and tragic. And then, he passed the stage to Megyn Kelly. If Greg was the firecracker, Megyn was the scalpel, ready to slice right to the core.
Okay, I hope you had a good week. I did, and no thanks to Howard Stern. True, the New York Post reported that Stern hit a chic restaurant in NYC with a crew of A-listers, including Jimmy Kimmel, Jennifer Aniston, Jon Hamm, Justin Theroux, Jason Bateman. I was not invited. I guess because my first name doesn't begin with the letter J.
Megyn opened by saying Stern's slide from rebel to relic wasn't shocking. It was inevitable. She argued that rebellion without principle always crumbles into compromise. Stern, she said, was never truly brave. He was just loud. And when the ratings no longer demanded outrage, he let it go. She laid out how his so-called evolution wasn't about wisdom or growth. It was about survival, about clinging to a spot at the elite media table. In doing so, he abandoned the very audience that made him a legend. The original Stern mocked conformity. The new Stern sells it, wrapped in podcast packaging. Megyn didn't hold back on his attempts at reinvention, saying no one was asking for a sensitive Howard Stern rebranded as America's late-in-life therapist. What people wanted was honesty, edge, and unapologetic grit. Instead, they got a Howard who whispers about enlightenment between celebrity chats that feel more like Beverly Hills group therapy. Then, she zeroed in on his sudden moral compass. The man who thrived on chaos now lectures others about being offensive, as if we've all forgotten the mountain of shock radio carnage in his past. This wasn't redemption, she said. It was revisionism, Stern trying to rewrite his own history with a highlighter and a Sharpie at the same time.
There's too much at stake. I believe the entire future of this country right now, I mean, as America, land of the free, home of the brave, I think it's literally on the line.
I agree with you.
And when I see them, how did you react to the Saturday Night Live bit?
Here's Stern on anyone daring to poke a little fun at Kamala.
Even when I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
Oh my God.
There's too much at stake. I believe the entire future of this country right now, I mean, as America, land of the free, home of the brave, I think it's literally on the line.
So a guy who's supposed to be funny for a living now claims her candidacy is too important to joke about.
Megyn honed in on the irony. Howard Stern, the man who once championed the fight against censorship, now hides behind political correctness, gets his armor. She said he didn't just join the establishment. He was swallowed whole by it. The shock jock who used to mock virtue signaling now wears it like a ceremonial sash. She compared the old Stern to a roaring lion and the new Stern to a declawed house cat, purring for approval from the very people who once branded him toxic. This wasn't evolution. It was retreat, not for wisdom, but for acceptance. Megyn highlighted his hypocrisy, calling out how he plays the outsider while living in a mansion, socializing with the elite, and lecturing average Americans about empathy and progress. The man who once tore down the walls of political correctness now builds fences around his own privilege and calls it transformation. She even laughed at how Stern treats his past like an ex he refuses to acknowledge, dodging decades of outrageous antics as if they don't belong to the mellow, self-proclaimed messiah he parades today. But Megyn reminded everyone, the old Stern built the empire. The new Stern is just renting the penthouse. And then she hit him again, questioning how a man who once claimed to speak truth to power now spends most of his airtime agreeing with them. Stern's voice, she said, no longer sparks rebellion. It's background noise, auditioning for a seat on a CNN panel.
Well, I just saw it, actually, and it was funny. I am a huge fan of Maya Rudolph's. I think she put a lot of time into doing the piece and the character.
Okay, so I do think it's interesting. He's very scared. A lot of I hear this from a lot of my Democrat friends. They're scared of Trump winning again. They're scared of Trump.
Nothing in Stern's previous career that could withstand this modern witch hunt that he now embraces. So this is a form of restitution. Maybe he says, if I'm woke too, the crocodile will eat me last, but they always do eat. But I get it. He flipped from populist to elitist because now he's with elitists. He's living in the Hamptons. What would the Stern of now think of the Stern of before?
Megyn's tone sharpened as she reminded everyone that Stern's legacy was built on making people uncomfortable in a way that provoked real conversation. But now, he's terrified of discomfort, terrified of labels, of criticism, of stepping even slightly outside the boundaries of the establishment he's desperate to please. Then came her knockout blow. Stern didn't grow. He shrank. He folded himself into the comfort of wealth, praise, and elite approval, all while pretending he's still the same fearless man behind the mic. But the truth is, the filter is still there. It's just written into his contract now. Greg jumped back in for one last jab, saying Stern is like a comedian who's lost his punchline, but still insists on telling the joke. Every show feels like a desperate plea to be taken seriously by a world that never asked for him to be serious in the first place. Greg even imagined Stern's future as less of a talk show and more like a retirement home radio hour, where guests lounge in bathrobes, sip tea, and discuss feelings, forgetting they were once entertaining. The revolution Stern claimed to lead has long passed him by, leaving only an echo, quietly fading behind a gold-plated microphone.
Right after the Columbine massacre that the killers should have raped the students before killing them. Not that I like that Stern, but this pendulum swing from saying the most tasteless thing in the universe to putting your balls in a Tic Tac container. You got to wonder what's going on here. It's striking that the king of the most misogynistic humor ever now turns into a breathless over a progressive, hopelessly shallow candidate.
Megyn agreed, concluding that Stern's real tragedy wasn't simply his evolution. It was that he betrayed his own identity for a seat at the very table he once flipped over for sport. He didn't become wise, he became quiet. Not for peace, but for permission. And in the world of radio legends, relevance comes with an expiration date, one that Stern might have already passed. Greg couldn't resist circling back for one more swipe at the crumbling statue of Howard Stern. He said the most entertaining part isn't even Stern's fall from grace. It's how completely oblivious Stern seems to be about it. In Greg's words, Stern is stuck in a soundproof booth of self-delusion, still thinking he's the outsider, the rebel, the provocateur, while the rest of the world watches him blend in with the establishment he once mocked for fun. Greg painted him as a man who used to run toward controversy like a moth to a flamethrower, now retreating from it like it's a bad Yelp review. Stern once broadcast with brass knuckles. Now it's soft gloves and hushed tones, the kind of show that comes with a weighted blanket and a side of chamomile tea. He's not the king of all media anymore. He's the duke of all disclaimers.
This is Stern's self-imposed penance for subjugating women to demoralizing stunts, capitalizing on desperate females thirsting for attention, even if it's from an oily paddle striking their bare asses. True, much of Stern's transformation is based mainly on a delusional hatred for Trump, but it's also coming from a bottomless hatred for himself and his past.
Greg mocked how Stern now fills entire segments with therapy talk, emotional breakthroughs, and long, winding stories about his spiritual journey, which somehow always circle back to how misunderstood he is. Greg laughed, saying it's no longer a radio show. It's an audiobook nobody asked for, narrated by a man still trying to convince himself that staying relevant means parroting whatever's trending on Twitter. Then Megyn stepped in one final time. Calm, steady, and absolutely unflinching. She said the real disappointment is that Stern had the platform, the reach, and the guts to question everything, yet chose to question nothing. He went from challenging the mob to desperately trying to blend into it, not because he believed in the new rules, but because he feared being left behind. She reminded everyone that Stern built his career on defiance, but now defines himself by how politely he can toe the line. In doing so, he's become a shadow of his former self. A living cautionary tale of what happens when rebellion is traded for comfort and authenticity is sold for clout. Megyn said, Stern doesn't need to apologize for growing up, but pretending that growth means erasing the past and acting like it never happened isn't integrity. It's cowardice. And when your entire brand was built on brutal honesty, abandoning it for validation is the ultimate betrayal.
Howard's simply redefining masculinity. And why is it always the male lefties who are so desperate to get rid of masculinity entirely? It's guilt and self-preservation. Because scrape beneath the surface of any liberal male, and what do you find? A creep, terrified of his priggish past. Piggish past, I mean, not priggish. What is priggish?
Greg nodded, wrapping it up in the only way he could. Sharp, biting, and unforgettable. He said Howard Stern didn't just walk away from the building. He remodeled it, covered the walls with mirrors, and now spends his days admiring his own reflection in a space he once promised to tear down. And that's the tragedy. Not simply that Stern changed, but that he forgot who he was. The shock jock became a sanctuary host, the provocateur turned people-pleaser, the once deafening voice of rebellion reduced to a faint echo inside a velvet-lined recording booth. Because when the king stops leading the charge and starts begging for applause, the kingdom doesn't collapse. It just stops listening. And that silence is louder than anything Stern could ever scream into a microphone.